He's able. Come on, you say. Oh, he's able. So, he's able. Come on, you say. He's able. I want to preach from the thought, touching the untouchable. Recently, we have seen the practice of laying hands all over mainstream media. If you are on social media, if you have been paying attention to the things that have been posted on Facebook and Instagram, then you would have seen that a few images of people laying hands. A few months ago, this image of Tyler Perry laying hands on T.D. Jakes was all over Facebook. I don't know if you saw it or not, but if not, take my word for it. It was all over the place. And then just a few months ago, there was also another image of these preachers laying hands on Donald Trump. This image received all kinds of criticism. Even this picture of these groomsmen laying hands on this groom has gone viral. It seems like the laying on of hands is trending. But the truth is, for us, the laying on of hands has always been more than a trend. When enslaved Africans were brought to the shores of America, they came with their indigenous faith traditions and, dare I say, their own experiences with God. However, when they were exposed to European Christianity, they began to blend the two. In his book, Slave Religion, Albert Roberto describes the religious life of a slave as being both visible and invisible. Slaves would attend the visible church with their masters on Sunday morning. It was in the visible church where slaves would hear how God wanted them to be good slaves. It was in the visible church where slaves were encouraged to be obedient and submissive to their masters. But all that preacher talked about was for us slaves to obey our masters and not lie and steal. But according to Rabato, the visible church was not the only church. He says that the slaves also had what he describes as the invisible church. Late in the midnight hour, after the master had fallen asleep, how many of you know that the slaves would leave slave quarters? They would steal away far from the big house and head to praying ground. At praying ground, slaves would hold what they called a religious meeting. At praying ground, they could worship God in a way that they couldn't worship God in the visible church. Praying ground, our ancestors worshiped a God whom they believed not only had the ability to see them, but a God who could see what they were going through. But you see, church, at praying ground, our ancestors knew what a single touch could do. When they got to praying ground, they would hold hands, they would touch and agree, they would lay hands on one another, just like we did today, because our ancestors knew the power of a touch. They believed that through the laying on of hands, they would receive healing for their mind, body, and soul. The untouchable believed that a touch from the Lord could change what they were going through. Do I have any witnesses in the house today who knows what a single touch from the Lord can do? You see, God can show up in your situation, and all he has to do is touch your problem, and somehow your problem will disappear. In reading this text, I realized that we have more in common with this man than we know. Leprosy is an infectious disease that causes severe and painful lesions to appear all over the skin. During this time, people living with leprosy were highly contagious and considered ritually unclean. They were separated from society, forced to live in colonies far away from the mainstream of Jewish life. Does this sound familiar to anybody? The problem wasn't just a medical problem. It was a social problem. You see, because of his skin, when people looked at this man, they didn't see a purpose, they didn't see a person, they saw a problem. He was disgraced and despised because his skin was a problem. He was discriminated against because his skin was a problem. He was deemed dangerous because his skin was a problem. When people were around him, they felt threatened and afraid because his skin was a problem. He was deemed untouchable because his skin was a problem. I wonder if there are any people in the house who know what this man is going through. How many of us here today have ever felt like our skin is a problem? I wonder who among us can say, I didn't get the job, I didn't get the house, I didn't get the car, I didn't get the loan, not because I wasn't qualified, not because I didn't meet the standards, not because of my credit score. I didn't get it because my skin was a problem. Tamir Rice and Sandra Bland and Eric Gardner, Rakia Boyd, Trayvon Martin, Emmett Till, they will all tell you their skin was a problem. Dove, they say they missed the mark. You see this black girl reaches down, pulls off her shirt, and underneath is a white woman. Now, I don't know what mark Dove was trying to hit, but they're right, they missed it, because the only thing that this image reinforces for most of us is that we still live in a society where people believe that our skin is a problem. If there's anyone here who knows what it's like to have a problem get in the way of your worship. I wonder how many people here have ever encountered a problem so big that you stopped going to church, you stopped praying, you stopped calling on God, you stopped believing that God can change your situation. You allowed a problem to have you dodging the pastor's calls and dodging the elder's call because you didn't even want to hear how good God was. There's someone sitting in the church today, you may be present, but you're not here because you're too focused on your problem. You're too focused on your problem. If this is in fact, when we have a problem, the presence of Jesus is exactly where we need to. So the next time you're facing a problem and it's Sunday morning, you better get up, get dressed, you better get in your car, you better drive to worship. I don't care what condition you're facing, I don't care what you look like, I don't care what you're thinking about. You make your way to worship because being in the presence of Jesus is exactly where you need to be when you are facing the problems of life.